Each term, summer, winter, and spring, the Loft schedules a huge variety of writing classes. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce one of our instructors, novelist and journalist, John DeDakis. John, could you introduce yourself and tell us how you got involved with the Loft?
Hi, Savannah. Yes, it's DeDakis. You got it right. I've been a writer for all my life, I guess, but published about little over 15 years ago. I write mystery suspense novels. My protagonist is a woman in her 30s. No, actually her 20s. She's getting older though. She's a White House correspondent. That's been my background. So you write what you know. And I teach writing at different literary centers around the country. And I got involved with the Loft. Oh man, it's probably about 5 years ago now, before COVID. So I was able to do it in person. I live in Baltimore now, so my commute is just down the stairs. So I'm able to do the class from here in Baltimore. But I've always been impressed with the students at the Loft, and the classes have been a lot of fun to do because I get great questions and there's a lot of give and take.
I'm glad that you started off by talking about your books because they, as you sort of mentioned, have pretty heavy socio-political themes. And you worked as a White House correspondent and also with CNN's The Situation Room. And so I'm just wondering how much of what comes from your books comes from your exact experience?
Well, a lot. I mean, obviously, you try to make things up as well and shade the truth in order for the story to be much more effective. But I definitely draw from personal experience, and which brings a sense of authenticity to the storytelling. Plus, I also have beta readers. These are those people who, they're more objective about your writing, because the more you write, the closer you get to a story, and you need someone who will read it with a fresh pair of eyes to tell you what's not working. And so I've had the benefit of working with beta readers who are White House correspondents or young women who will tell me what I'm getting right and what I'm getting wrong, so that by the time it gets published, Lark is pretty much a real person.
And telescoping out a little bit from your exact work with this mystery suspense series, you write both fiction and nonfiction, obviously, with journalism. So can you just talk a little bit about how in your own work, those two genres have played off of each other?
Well, the thing I learned in writing for the ear, for broadcast journalism, is to write tight and fast. Because you don't have the benefit in journalism of waiting for the muse to strike. You just have to write because you're on deadline. And so that helped a lot by just getting something onto the page, and then as much time as you have trying to mold it and buff it and polish it so that it's as clear as possible. So writing fast and writing tight were the hallmarks of broadcast journalism, and it informed my writing as a novelist as well. And so there really isn't much difference in the two, because the goal in good storytelling is to be clear so that you get it and you are propelled forward with the way the story is unspooling. So journalism was a great intro to writing fiction. Although, unlike what some presidents will tell you, in journalism, it's a firing offense to make things up. Whereas as a novelist, I get to make it up all the time.
I feel like your editor probably really appreciates the attention to deadline.
Yes.
That came in mind.
Yes, definitely that.
So you had this decades-long journalism career, and obviously you're also an instructor. So it might be a little bit surprising to some people that you just wrote a blog post about being an introvert and being a successful writer as an introvert. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the topic of that blog post and also how that has applied to your life and your career.
Well, I'm writing a memoir right now, actually, and it's a little daunting to go back and look at your young self, because I mean, I was painfully shy. I think I'm probably at heart an extrovert, but I've got major introvert tendencies. I can be alone and not lonely. I'm good company, I guess you could say. Um, but one of the things that, of course, broadcast journalism, it puts you in contact with a lot of other people. And as I mentioned in the blog, in 1984, I was covering the presidential election, the primaries in New Hampshire. And I had to do person on the street interviews. It took me 20 minutes to get the courage to ask someone, who are you going to vote for president? How silly is that to be hamstrung and frightened to ask that simple question? And so I deconstructed it. And I've learned a lot. I think this is the key to being a good writer. The better you know yourself, the better your writing will be, because you're drawing from a place of personal pain, personal authenticity. And in terms of fear, I think that's a writer's companion, whether you're an extrovert or not, because it's daunting to take something that's so personal and then get it out there and know that it's probably not as good as it could be. You know, people are not going to like it, or some people might. So getting that courage is something that took a while. And that's something I actually talk about in my classes. My commencement address, if you will, is basically facing your fears as a writer, because that is part of the process.
And what part in your writing career did you realize that you were really drawn to being a teacher as well?
I think that took a while. My mom was a third grade teacher, so I was on the receiving end of a lot of teaching. And sometimes I kind of bristled at it. But at the same time, I think journalism, it's teaching, because you're writing to inform, not persuade, but to inform. And I think, though, that I began to start being interested in teaching when I taught myself, because of all the mistakes I was making when I was first writing my first novel. I mean, it took 10 years for me to get the agent I've got. The manuscript went through for like 14 major revisions, and my agent, the one I have now, is the 39th agent that I queried. So I learned a lot in the process, was able to deconstruct what went wrong. And so then it just became possible and easy and fun to be able to let people know how they can avoid some of the mistakes. So I tell my students, if you take good notes, I'll save you 9 years in the process. And it's just fun. It's fun to be able to see that light bulb go off in someone's mind when they realize that really they can write, because it's so easy for a creative person to talk themselves out of it. And at my core, I'm an encourager. I really like to be able to, help people see the possibilities.
So this class that you're teaching coming up, the novice to novelist class, obviously is focusing on how to bring your fiction to the point of potentially getting it published. But beyond that, what is it that you really hope your students gain or take away?
Well, first, I hope they get a sense of possibility, that they see that they have the facility to communicate, because we all communicate. We all tell stories. We communicate every day. But a lot of people think that being a writer is different. You have to be writerly. And what I try to help people understand is, if you've got the passion, then it's just a matter of getting it down on paper. And so that's part of it. Part of it is getting it down on paper. Part of it is having the confidence to, go forward with it. So I guess I like to have people come away from the class with a sense of possibility and a sense that they really can see the project through all the way. I can't guarantee that somebody's going to get published, but I think that they'll come away with a better sense of what's in them, what they have to say, and how they can craft it in a way that might be interesting to someone else.
You're an instructor at a few different organizations, so either through the Loft or the other organizations where you work, are there other areas that you just get really excited teaching about?
Well, I mean, my first love is teaching people how to write a novel, from a blank screen all the way to marketing your work. And marketing is part of the process. Unless you're John Grisham and you don't need, a marketing team, you have to nowadays, if you're going to get published, you have to demonstrate to a prospective agent that you are committed to marketing your work. So marketing is something that I like talking about. And I just like to, dig into the details of creating characters, buffing and polishing, because rewriting is a major part of the process. So I guess all levels of the creative process are engaging to me. And I hope in my teaching, I'm able to help people, better grasp, understand, and do what's necessary to get published.
Then just going back to your own work really quickly, I'm curious about what it is about, the mystery thriller suspense genre that just caught your attention as a writer.
The interesting thing, though, is that when I wrote the first manuscript, it was a mishmash. And I didn't even know what my genre was until probably the 10th draft. It was getting rejected. So I went to a book club that met in our neighborhood in Atlanta where we lived. And so 25 women agreed to read the manuscript and then let me sit in on their critique. So remember, I write as a woman. So that was an educational experience right from there. But the major takeaway was that, as I was listening to them take my novel apart, I realized that I had 3 subplots that I didn't need. And if I extracted those, I came away, instead of it being a 150,000 word mishmash, it became a 75,000 word mystery suspense novel. I didn't even know what my genre was until I'd gotten the critical feedback from those beta readers. So what I like about writing mystery and thriller is that, mysteries are solving problems, solving puzzles. That's what journalism was all about. And thrillers, well, that's just the ticking time bomb. Time is of the essence. I wrote under deadline all the time. So it just kind of brings to the writing all of what has been part of my life all together. So it's just taking what's been there and then focusing it on that kind of storytelling.
For your own life, and also, I suppose, the way that you see art reflected in the lives of your students, what is it about writing and the literary arts in general that really resonates with you?
The arts are so underappreciated in our society. And yet that is the essence of our humanity. And I don't know, maybe that sounds cheesy, but God, we live in such a toxic environment right now where it's a zero-sum game. It's like, you win at all costs. And the consequence is that we're so polarized right now that we don't even agree on what the facts are. And that is the antithesis of what it means, I think, to be human, in a sense of being connected to each other and the bigger world. So I think that's where the arts come in. That's where good storytelling comes in, because good storytelling has to do with relationships. It has to do with characterization. It has to do with problem solving. And I think that the arts give us that window into other people's lives. And it broadens our horizon, because right now, we're living in a very myopic time where, people are only seeing their own self-interest, and they're, I think, blind to the bigger world around them. And I think that's where the arts can come in. And I think that's where writing can really light a candle for the rest of the world.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like that's really the pinnacle of writing as center point of community.
Yes. Well
Well,
said.
one final question for you, a little bit
Sure.
more about you as a person than your own work. So when you aren't teaching or writing, how is it that you like to spend your time?
Well, my wife and I have been married coming up on 45 years. And I think COVID has probably either made or broken marriages. Ours has come closer together because, in spite of the fact that we're stuck here all day, um, we've started a tradition that's gone on for a couple of years now where I usually get up early and I get down here and I write. And then about 8, she'll send me a text, I'm ready for coffee. And so I'll go upstairs and I'll bring her coffee and we'll read Heather Cox Richardson to each other, who's a Boston historian who talks about the day's news and puts it in a historical context. And, so yeah, being with my wife has been a real oasis during this time. And yet at the same time, she lets me write and do my thing as well. So it's a good symbiotic relationship.
That does sound like a nice outcome of
Yeah,
COVID. Trying to refigure our daily schedules has been interesting.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, for all of our listeners and viewers, you can find John's classes as well as our full lineup by visiting loft.org/classes. John, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, Savannah. It's been fun.